Hi, everybody, and welcome to the season finale of the Fantasy Kickoff. It's Sunday morning. It's Championship Sunday in fantasy football, and we're here to bring you all the news and notes regarding your lineup. I'm Nick Seuberling, once again hanging out for the final time with Andrew Fox Miller of SB Nation. Andrew, what's happening, buddy?
Bittersweet, Nick. We pulled it off, and now we're it's goodbye. I mean, it's and not just you and I, not just to those listening and watching, but to this that to fantasy football. It's sad.
It's
I mean,
amazing how fast it flew by.
it really is, yeah. And so now it's just going to be a whole off season of speculation for a very long time until it drives you crazy, and then we're just going to be dying for fantasy football again. So I mean, I don't know, fantasy baseball. I am not doing a fantasy kickoff show for baseball. I'll tell you that right now.
Ooh, that would be a very, very long season. Ooh, yeah. I might have to say no dice on that one.
Yeah.
As well. But for those folks who are in their respective Super Bowl championship, whatever you want to call it in your league, it is a big day. Lots on the line in fantasy football. So for those people that have some players that are questionable with injury, where are we looking at today?
Well, we'll put the big names out there. Aaron Rodgers, fantasy owners, whether it was a trade for him, hoping to buy low, or whether you've held on to him all season, it is time to say goodbye to Aaron Rodgers as a fantasy prospect in 2013. He's ruled out for Sunday's game. That's it. I mean, it's unfortunate for anyone that drafted him, in the first 3, 4, their lucky 5 rounds of their fantasy draft. He is no more from a fantasy perspective. So he will not be playing. And we'll talk about some quarterbacks that you can start in a little bit here. Also on the injury front, we have Maurice Jones-Drew. He's worth mentioning. He is questionable. I'm going to talk a little bit about his backup, his replacement, Jordan Todman. But in the meantime, it's a shaky possibility that he may or may not start with as far as MGD is concerned. So keep an eye out for him. For what it's worth, Darren McFadden is practicing as of Friday. He will play against the Chargers. Adrian Peterson, he's still listed as questionable. He was limited on Friday. Keep an eye out for him to see whether or not he'll be starting against the Bengals on Sunday. Jonathan Stewart, for those that weren't aware, he is out with a torn MCL. Ben Tate of the Texans, he is out for the year. And lastly, a couple other notes really quickly. There's some questionable statuses out there. Just keep an eye out for those. But for those that aren't aware, Cecil Shorts, he's on injury reserve. He is out for the year. Wes Welker, he has been ruled out of Sunday's game. He's been dealing with concussion symptoms. And lastly, probably importantly, Jordan Cameron, he's ruled out for Sunday's game as well, also dealing with concussions. So a lot of that going on right now, especially being a championship week. Keep an eye out for some of the questionable tags out there, but those are the big ones that you probably will not see on Sunday.
Last week we saw from the Minnesota Vikings, Matt Asiata. I think I'm saying that right. It's time now for start sit. A lot of people, I don't know if you started him last week, but if you did, you got a pretty big day from him. But you did mention Adrian Peterson. It also sounds like Toby Gerhart is back as well for the Vikings, Andrew. So if you're a Matt Asiata owner, you're probably not starting him this week, right?
Yeah, he was very, when you look at his numbers, he didn't have very impressive yards per carry. It was a lot of his production was the end zone. So it's fair to say he's touchdown dependent with what little we know about him. Cincinnati is not necessarily going to be an easy task, especially at home in Cincinnati for the Bengals. So I think if you got lucky on that one, enjoy it. I don't know that he's a bit too much of a gamble for me in a championship week moving forward. As far as my starts, we talked about Rodgers not playing. A couple of options out there that may or may not be owned, or maybe they're sitting on your bench to consider. Kirk Cousins, we've got something to work with here, don't we? Look, he had a big game last week, 381 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Dallas isn't stopping anyone. I want to bring him up. Maybe he was a hot topic this week. This week on SB Nation's War Room, I heard Kirk Cousins questions just repeatedly. So here's my take on him. First of all, I like him this week. Yeah, obviously, I'm labeling him as a start for Week 16. That said, I do believe that you're playing with fire to a certain extent. He's still relatively unproven. He could surprise us. He could put up a dud. You never really know. The matchup is very good, though. I will admit that. So I like him over a handful of like QB1s, like an Andrew Luck. I like him more than I like Romo this week. I even like him more than I like Tom Brady against Baltimore this week. but I'm not going to start him over some of the studs that we've seen throughout the season that have helped owners get to where they are today. So, and of those names I'll throw out there, Stafford, I'm starting Stafford over Cousins. I'm starting Nick Foles over Cousins. They've gotten owners through at least half the season. Foles has. So, and even arguably to some degree, I know it's a tough matchup against Carolina. Drew Brees, I feel like I would sleep easier knowing I'm starting him even in a tough matchup against Carolina versus Cousins. Again, there's just some unknown out there that really worries me. But at the end of the day, I do believe he's a QB1, and I think he can be started if you've got worse options out there. Another quarterback I do like this week, and Nick, let's bring this home for a second here. Andy Dalton. As odd as the 30-20 loss was to the Steelers on Sunday, Dalton racked up a solid 19 points in most formats. The Vikings are giving up the second most fantasy points to quarterbacks over the last 5 weeks. Cincinnati excels at home. I like him this week. I take him over a handful of bad matchups, much like I would Kirk Cousins. I think he's sort of on the low end QB1 discussion. He's probably one of the best QB2s you could have out there. So kind of look at what you're waging against. Again, Andrew Luck. I like Dalton more than Luck this week. So keep an eye out on that. I think Dalton is a start this week, nonetheless.
Oh yeah, Minnesota's defense is horrible. So
right,
not just in the pass, but the run. So you know that they're going to use the run to set up the play action and AJ Green deep. So I'd be shocked if Andy Dalton had a bad game at home where they've scored 40 points 3 straight times. So yeah, I would obviously start Andy Dalton.
And you look at some of the struggles that the Bengals had as a whole last week, and Dalton, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to suffer from a production standpoint, especially in fantasy, in the world of fantasy football. So yeah, even if there's some miscues on defensively or whether it's special teams, I still believe Dalton can churn out a good one for owners in their championship week. We talked about Maurice Jones-Drew. I kind of want to put a little bit of a footnote out there. If Jordan Todman does play, and the same, and replace what I'm saying here with Maurice Jones-Drew, we can kind of make this twofold. But even Jordan Todman, Tennessee struggles against the run. That's at this point we all know that we're 16 weeks into the season. To me, it's a straightforward, simple start here. I think he should be an RB2. I think he's a great flex. Definitely roll with him if you have him. And again, if Maurice Jones-Drew does come back in, he's also, in my opinion, a start. Another running back I really like this week is Le'Veon Bell. I love Bell this week against Green Bay. Look, DeMarco Murray, Steven Jackson, Reggie Bush, they've all had great games against the Packers over the past month. He's been a top RB2 all season, and I could make the argument that he's going to be an RB1 against the Pack this week. So I think get him in there if you've got him. He's one of my favorites this week personally. Lastly, I'm going to put his name out there again. He disappointed me last week. Dennis Pitta, tight end for the Ravens. I'm throwing him out there because I feel like people are going to be discouraged enough to maybe play a lesser option over him in fear of him getting another 2-catch performance. Look, the Patriots have been destroyed by tight ends over the past 5 weeks, giving up the second most fantasy points in that time frame. Owners may shy from starting Pitta. Again, 2 catches last week, but I'm saying that he should be given another chance. I still believe he's a tight end 1. If you had confidence in him last week, apply that same confidence this week. I believe in Pitta this week. Start him if you have him. That's it for my starts. Players that I don't like this week. And some of these I'm going to point out again with SB Nation, a lot of names that were circulating through for our fantasy war room this week. Andre Caldwell, believe it or not, is a hot topic this
week.
Former Bengal. Everyone's asking me about Andre Caldwell. I feel like people are way too high on him. I know he had a great week last week. And I know that Welker is out. There's that, okay? Look, in my opinion, he is a wide receiver 4. He's got upside. We saw that with a 2-touchdown performance last week. If you are in a complete just bind at wide receiver, I get it. He has Peyton Manning throwing to him. Welker's out again. He should be the team's wide receiver 3 on the depth chart, on the Broncos depth chart. I'm just not buying into Caldwell repeating anything. Definitely not that performance. Maybe not even getting into the end zone. I think he's entirely touchdown dependent. So start him with caution if you have him. But I feel like people are a little bit too high on him and calling him a consensus, clear-cut wide receiver 3. I'm not buying into that. And I don't know that I'm buying into it when there's a lot on the line this week for every fantasy owner out there. Andre Brown. I loved Andre Brown since before he stepped back into the field. There was a few times we talked about ownership percentages before he came back, and I highly recommended that you picked him up. And for the most part, he's performed up until this point. I thought he would surprise us against Seattle. the Giants, I should say, let me down, but he let me down from a fantasy perspective. I'm not willing to start him against the Lions. Eli will be throwing the ball likely all day. The Lions are stronger against the run than they are against the pass. I'd like to believe that the Giants will find a way to get Brown more involved this week, as a bigger part of the game plan. But again, not betting my championship on him. So for me, Andre Brown is a sit this week. Lastly, wide receiver Steve Smith of the Carolina Panthers. I think owners are going to be tempted to start him at home against the high octane Saints offense. It just seems natural that he'll be heavily involved in keeping Carolina on the scoreboard. Just consider this a friendly reminder that Steve Smith has had 4 touchdowns all season, and he has not eclipsed 69 yards in the year 2013. To me, I think he must be on your bench this week. I would never gamble him in my championship when you consider what he's done this season. He's been an okay wide receiver 3, but again, he's just not getting enough production to warrant a start even against the Saints at home. And that's my start set for the final week of our show and of your fantasy season, more than likely.
Well, that's going to be a huge game in the NFC South. We just saw it a couple weeks ago. The Saints really were able to move the ball down the field at will against that Panthers secondary. I'd imagine you're going to see a lot of that today, but I understand that the Saints have not played well on the road, but you're right. We have not seen a whole lot of Steve Smith, even when the Panthers were on that 8-game winning streak.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I thought coming into the season he would be more heavily targeted than he has been, but to his credit, Cam Newton has done he's done a good job at spreading the ball around. But from a fantasy perspective, that doesn't leave much for us. So it's a toss up whoever you play, including the once fantasy stud Steve Smith.
Yeah. Well, LaFell and Olsen have been some targets there in Carolina that you could tell Cam Newton has really grown a liking to there in Carolina. All right, it's time now for Stud, Dud, and Sleeper, which was the new segment we introduced last week. What do you got for us this week?
All right, so my stud this week is LaShawn McCoy. Look, it's the Bears. I mean, they've given up on average over the last over the last 5 weeks, on average, they've given up 170 yards and a touchdown to every running back that faces them. So it's nuts. McCoy, I think he's going to have a hell of a final game for owners in their championship. To me, he is the stud of the week. My dud is Rashard Mendenhall. And I feel like I need to point him out because naturally you would think it's Rashard Mendenhall against the Seahawks. You would naturally think you wouldn't start him, but I'm pointing him out as a dud simply because he scored in 4 of his last 5 games. In fact, the last time he played Seattle, he scored against them. But he also, in that game against Seattle in Arizona, had 13 carries for 22 yards. So my point is that, of course, playing Seattle this week, I don't trust him. I don't think you should either. It was fun while it lasted, Rashard Mendenhall, but you're my dud this week. Lastly, my sleeper. I'm going to go out there and say Aldrick Robinson, wide receiver for the Washington Redskins. Dallas makes him an intriguing option. He was targeted 7 times last week, and Cousins, he's been playing well. So he's a bit of a desperation play, but that's what makes him a sleeper. I like his upside. I'd even arguably throw Santana Moss into the mix from a sleeper perspective in PPR leagues because of his target count with Cousins in. But again, Aldrick Robinson is my sleeper of the week.
Well, there you have it. Your stud, dud, and sleeper of the week. It's time now for our favorite segment. And that's our bold predictions, which we were kind of spot on last week when it came to Kirk Cousins. He had a pretty good day in Atlanta. You could argue that they probably should have won that game had it been for maybe a better 2-point play there at the end of the game. But he definitely outperformed Matt Ryan and showed some things in the pocket for the Redskins. I don't know if there's necessarily a controversy there, but it's been a hot topic all week. So with that said, let's hear your bold prediction for this week.
Okay, my bold prediction is that Monty Ball. We're getting into the final portion of the season. I still think Noshawn Moreno will have a decent game, but I think Monty Ball is going to crack 100 rushing yards this week. I think he will be a top 10 running back in Week 16. That's my bold prediction.
Wow. All right. Well, there you have it. Andrew's bold prediction. I'm going to stay close to home as far as my fantasy lineup because, believe it or not, I am in the championship today. You're going down, Josh, if you're watching this. I've ridden this horse all year. I don't know if it'll come true, but Ray Rice, I think, is poised to have a big day in Baltimore. The Patriots defense is one of the worst at stopping the run. They obviously are missing some key guys. Wilfork, Mayo there in the middle for the Patriots defense. So why not? Ray Rice in a must-win game for the Baltimore Ravens. I think he goes off and has over 100 yards rushing today against New England. That's pretty bold.
What? You've gotten this far with Ray Rice. He owes it to you. You deserve it if he can pull this out for you.
And I'm probably not even going to play him. I'm going with I'm going with Fred Jackson and Reggie Bush. Can you blame me?
It's tough to associate bold during your championship week. I get it.
I know, but the fact that I'm even there is a miracle in itself. All right, so that's going to wrap up this edition of the Fantasy Kickoff. It's been a fun season. It's been great bringing you these videos each and every Sunday morning. Andrew, I will miss hanging out with you and recording these episodes. And, well, good luck with everything, and I'm sure we'll kick it off again next fall.
Yeah, we'll get back to the drawing board. Never know. Maybe some new segments, maybe a new format. We'll figure it out, but we'll try to get as much information as we can with our schedules. Thanks for everything, Nick. Great working on the video, hosting. It's perfect. So thank you.
And for everybody watching, and if you're playing today in your championship, good luck. And for everybody else, we wish you happy holidays, and we'll see you in 2014. Take care, everybody.
Good luck.